Hello and welcome to the Petticoated Swashbuckler. My name is Maren and today I'm starting a new epic adventure. So first of all, I hope you all can hear me fine, because there's a guy mowing a lawn, like right behind me. He was mowing the lawn right down here, so I had to wait a bit to film, but I hope you can hear me all right. So my last video I made for 1960s dresses, and I've been thinking for a while about the 60s. Not necessarily the 1960s as much, but just 60s in general. I have done a lot of like 1760s to 70s, through my Anne Bamford project. I did a ton of 1860s a couple of years ago, and through my medieval reenactment group I've done a lot of 1260s, and then because we were part of a big battle reenactment on Gotland a few years ago, we did a lot of 1360s. So there's a surprising amount of my costuming experience that is tied to specific 60s, the 60s of several different centuries. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to recreate clothing from the last 1,000 years, but just the 60s. So I love medieval reenactment. I've done a lot of it. I would challenge you now, pause this video and go and Google medieval costume and see what you get. This is my search result. As you can see, it's varied, and that's a problem for me as a medieval historian. I love medieval history, I love medieval costuming. I do not love the fact that people take the 1,000 years that are the Middle Ages and just put them in one box and say this is medieval. My best kind of semi-recent example of this is the Robin Hood movie with Russell Crowe, where the extras are dressed beautifully for the 1100s. And then, of course, Robin Hood, as Russell Crowe's figure, is wearing typical kind of main character stuff. Stuff like no helmet, for example. The obligatory leather breeches, although leather breeches were worn, but for other reasons than, looking like biker pants. And then, I don't know if Lady Marian had her own costume designer or what happened, but she's wearing everything. Whoever made her costumes Googled medieval women's costumes and then made everything. So in one moment she's wearing something from the 1100s, another moment she's wearing something from the 14 or 1500s, and pretty much everything in between, which is lovely. But the thing is, the Middle Ages isn't one homogeneous box of clothing. People didn't wake up, in the 800s and we're like, okay, I guess the late antiquity is over, better dress medieval today. And then they wore the same stuff all the way up through the Reformation. Costume changes, fashion changes. They did have fashion in the Middle Ages as well, and I want to explore that. So my plan, my rather ambitious plan, is to create clothing from the earliest bit of the Middle Ages. So depending on who you ask, very often when you ask people, they're like, the Middle Ages is from year 500 to year 1500. But it really depends on what brackets you want to use. How do you want to define the start and the end, And I think a lot of people use the fall of the Roman Empire as the start of the Middle Ages, which kind of makes sense. And the earliest part of the Middle Ages is also often called the Dark Ages, which, if you think dark as in horrible, evil, terrible, everyone were awful and ate nothing but gruel. I'm not completely agreeing with that. However, if you mean dark by we really don't know what went on, then you're spot on, because the Romans were really good at writing stuff down, and when they left, the people who knew how to write stuff down left with them. So you're left with a population of people who don't know how to chronicle stuff. And for many parts of Europe, there's like a 200-300 year kind of gap where there's very little written evidence, and we really have to rely on archaeology a lot. And that's also difficult because the Romans used a lot of metalwork. They knew how to produce glass. They used a lot of pottery, stuff that lasts really well in the ground, whereas the people who came after tended to use wood and leather and stuff that does not live on as well. So it's those early years of the Middle Ages are really, really difficult to know anything about. So I might try and do something like Celt-ish for like the 500 or 600, but I don't. It's really difficult. We have so little evidence and so little to go off of. But apart from that, I will venture into many parts of Europe. That's also part of the fun, because of course also people didn't wear the same thing everywhere. You know, people wore different clothes in Scandinavia from what they wore in Russia, from what they wore in England, from what they wore in Italy, and that's also fun to explore and compare. And hopefully you will see kind of through the ages what changes happen and how they will how they will kind of affect each other, how different fashions affect each other. Usually when fashions changes, they tend to go from one extreme to the other, so that's interesting. And I'm excited because I think I learned a lot new stuff as well. Like I said, I've done a lot of medieval reenactment, but it's been mostly the 1200s, a little bit the 1300s. I've done very little Viking reenactment, which is unusual for a Norwegian reenactor. Usually that's where we all start. That's where you get your kind of your first taste of history, of living history. And when we get to the later Middle Ages, the 1400s and 1500s, I did the 1530s. I did Anne Boleyn, but apart from that, that's not, you know, ages that I've done a lot from. I haven't done the 14 and the 1500s as a reenactor, so that'll be very exciting. So yeah, I hope you'll come along with me on this silly, ambitious project where I intend to recreate as well as I can within my means and the knowledge available to me, clothes from the Middle Ages. So 560, 660, 760, 860, 960, 1060, 1160, 1260, 1360, 1460 and 1560. 1560 is on the edge of the Middle Ages. Some people would say beyond the edge and into the Renaissance, but I'm a completionist. Maybe we'll even do 1660. We'll see. I hope you'll stick with me. I will be making a lot of clothes, but I'll also look at some techniques to produce trim. I will try my hand at shoemaking. I will try my hand at making other kinds of accessories like hairnets or hoods or aprons. And there's going to be, hopefully we're going to do a very sexy Halloween costume, so that's exciting. Look out for that. And yeah, I'm excited. I hope you are too. But until next time, bye.